Okay, so right off the bat, this word often is telling me that whatever follows is going to talk about something that usually happens. Often, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry is given to a single person, such as Richard Martin Millstetter in 1915. So this tells me that what usually happens is that this prize is given to a single person. But sometimes the Nobel Committee wants to reward work attributed to 2 or 3 individuals, in which case the award is given blank. So this but is telling me that it's making a direct contrast to what the first sentence said, which is that a single person usually receives a prize. This in which case shows me that the word we're looking for is part of an example of what is the opposite to what usually happens. And then we keep reading. For instance, in 2020, Jennifer Doudna was among those awarded for the development of a method for genome editing. So in a direct example, Jennifer Doudna was among those, telling us that there were multiple people receiving the prize instead of just a single person. So we know that the word that we're looking for is also going to indicate that an award was given to more than one person. Okay, with that in mind, about how we're looking for a word that tells us the opposite of a prize given to a single person, we're going to look at all the answer choices. So A is retroactively, which means when something is applied to a time before. Without the context, the award is given retroactively could work because, yes, you are awarded a prize to an achievement you made in the past. But given that we have our context, this wouldn't work. We're looking for a word that indicates something opposite to a prize given to a single person, and retroactively isn't the opposite of that at all. Then we look at B, ceremoniously. This means in a formal, ritualistic way. Again, this isn't the opposite of a prize given to a single person. This would actually be the opposite of an award given maybe in a non-structured, a non-formal way. So this wouldn't work in our context either. Then we see jointly, which means together with other people. Immediately we know that yes, together and with other people is the opposite of a single person. And then D wouldn't be the case because reluctantly also is not the opposite of a single person. So A, B, and D just don't really correlate with what our context is talking about. So we would say C, jointly, is our answer. The award is given jointly, which is the opposite of what usually happens when an award is given to a single person. Now, number 2 is also looking for a word that best matches our context. As with other river deltas, so it's saying that whatever follows is similar to other river deltas. The Krishna River Delta is blank. It is a constantly evolving network of channels and strips of land that change in size and shape as the river deposits new sedimentary particles where the river meets the waters of the Bay of Bengal. So this later half of the sentence is telling us a bunch of qualities about the Krishna River. It's saying it's constantly evolving. It changes in size and shape. And it's saying that these qualities of the Krishna River is similar to the qualities of other river deltas. So now we look at the answer choices. A is sustainable, which means able to be maintained at a particular level. So the qualities mentioned about the Krishna River isn't talking about how the river can maintain itself or its condition. It's talking about how the river itself is just constantly changing. So we would say, nope, A does not fit. Unrivaled means better than everything of the same type. If we were to say the Krishna River Delta is unrivaled, then it would be putting the Krishna River above other river deltas. But as we can see here, it's saying as with other river deltas, which means that we're looking for something that the Krishna River shares in common with other river deltas. So it would not be fitting to say that the Krishna River Delta is unrivaled because we're talking about qualities that they share. C is immutable, which means unchanging over time. So we can see here that immutable is just the direct opposite of what the text is trying to say, because the text says it constantly evolves, it changes in size. And so for us to say that the Krishna River is unchanging would be wrong. So we cross that out. D, dynamic. Dynamic means characterized by constant change. This does fit what the qualities are talking about. It is a constantly evolving as in changing. It changes in size and shape. So yes, this would match. We would say D. Number 3, we are also looking for a word that best fits the context of the passage. Many of late 19th century artist James McNeill Whistler's oil paintings and lithographs depict the streets of European cities. While his contemporaries' approaches to these subjects were often sentimental, Whistler's eyes seemed blank. So this while is making a comparison between his contemporaries, which just mean other artists, approaches to these subjects were often sentimental. Whistler's eyes seemed blank. So this blank is going to be a contrast to what his contemporaries' approaches are. So a contrast to sentimental. In this way, he anticipated the early 20th century photographs of Walker Evans, which create the illusion of being objective documentations of life. So we know that the text is trying to make a contrast between his contemporaries' approaches and Whistler's approaches. And it's also saying that his contemporaries' approaches are sentimental. And sentimental means emotional or nostalgic. And nostalgic means longing for the past. Anticipated means he expected or predicted. So it's saying that in Whistler's approach, he predicted another type of work by Walker Evans, which creates the illusion of being objective. And objective means not influenced by feeling. So the clues we're being given here is that this word is going to be the opposite of sentimental, is going to be objective, and the opposite of sentimental and objective just means without feeling. So we look at the answer choices here. A is tranquil, which means peaceful. We're looking for the opposite of emotional or the opposite of feeling, and peaceful just doesn't really fit that. So we're going to immediately cross that out. Peculiar, this means strange or unusual. This really doesn't have anything to do with differences in emotional tone. And we're looking for something that is the opposite of feeling, opposite of sentimental. So opposite of feeling is not strange or unusual. So we can immediately cross that out. Nostalgic. We actually saw that his contemporaries' works are sentimental. They are nostalgic. And we're trying to say that Whistler's work is different than nostalgic. So to say again that Whistler's eye or his approach is nostalgic would just say that it's the same as his contemporaries, which is not the case. Dispassionate means emotionally detached. Now, this is exactly what we're looking for because we were looking for the opposite of sentimental or the opposite of feeling. So this would be our answer. Now we look at number 4, which asks, which choice best describes the overall structure of the text? Now, when a question asks for overall structure, it's asking you about how the content is organized. So I like to think of it as the order of content that shows up. So as we're reading, I'm going to keep the order of the text in mind. The following text is adapted from George Eliot's 1857 short story, The Sad Fortunes of the Reverend Amos Barton. Mr. Eli is a clergyman in the town of Milby. Clergyman just means a male religious leader. By the laity, I'm going to quickly tell you what laity is. It just means ordinary people, so not leaders. By the laity of Milby, which is the town and its neighborhood, Mr. Eli was regarded as a man of quite remarkable powers and learning who must make a considerable sensation in London pulpits and drawing rooms on his occasional visit to the metropolis. And by his brother clergy, he was regarded as a discreet and agreeable fellow. Mr. Eli never got into a warm discussion. He suggested what might be thought, but rarely said what he thought of himself. He never let either men or women see that he was laughing at them, and he never gave anyone an opportunity of laughing at him. So when I look at this text, I can see that it's kind of divided into 2 parts. The first part is right here, where it talks about what the ordinary people or the laity of Milby, of the town of Milby, think of Mr. Eli. Our second part here talks about the qualities of Mr. Eli. So that's just what I'm immediately noticing. And so now that we know the order of the content, we're going to go look at the answer choices to see which one matches up with the order of the text that we know. So A says, it relates how Mr. Eli had initially earned the respect of his colleagues. So this answer choice is saying that this comes first, and then recounts the circumstances under which their views of him began to change. So it's saying that this is the second part. Now, the first part that we established was just what the laity of Milby think of him. So number 1 could work, but let's look at number 2. Recounts the circumstances under which their views of him began to change. Now, the second part that we identified talks about the qualities of Mr. Eli. It doesn't talk about how the laity started seeing him differently. If we look at letter B, it says that the first part is, it implies that Mr. Eli's neighbors are more naive in their estimation of him than people in London are. And then explains, okay, so this is saying this is the second part, and then explains why his neighbors have been so easily misled. In the first part that we identified, we didn't really see an implication of how the laity of Milby might be naive in their thoughts of him. It just talks about literally what their thoughts of him are. But okay, let's look at part 2. B is saying, okay, then it explains why his neighbors have been so easily misled. But the part 2 that we identified is only talking about the qualities of Mr. Eli. It doesn't talk about the neighbors again and how the neighbors are being tricked. So B is gone. C, it presents the favorable opinion of Mr. Eli that other people hold. Okay, that's our first and then describes the behaviors of Mr. Eli that enable him to maintain that favorable opinion. That actually really well matches what we identified. Number one, we said, oh yeah, the laity of Milby, or the ordinary people of Milby, think of Mr. Eli as a discreet and agreeable fellow. Discreet just means careful, unoffending. Agreeable means pleasant. So yes, that is a very favorable opinion. And then C in number 2 says that it describes the behaviors of Mr. Eli that enable him to maintain that favorable opinion. If we look at the number 2 that we identified in the text, yes, it does describe the behaviors of Mr. Eli. It does talk about his qualities. So we would choose C. If we look at D, it says it highlights the disparity between Mr. Eli's public and private behavior and then conveys why he labors to obscure his true self from other people. Well, number 1 is already wrong, or it doesn't match, because number 1 only talks about what people or what the public think of Mr. Eli. It doesn't make any comparison between his behaviors in public and private. And then number 2 doesn't explain reasoning for why he behaves the way he does. So D would also be wrong. Number 5 is also a structure question. So we're looking at the order of the content that appears in the text. Mexican architect Louis Barragan's prolific career. Prolific meaning plentiful or fruitful career, which spanned the 1920s to the 1980s, evolved through distinct phases. After traveling to the United States and Europe in the early 1930s and immersing himself in a broader architectural discourse, Barragan shifted his style to incorporate principles of modernism as seen in the Pizarro Suarez house. The project's unadorned geometric forms, typical of the modernist aesthetic, contrasted with the historically inspired architecture seen in his earlier projects in Guadalajara, such as the house in Calle Pedro Loza. So let's look at the order of content that appears. The first thing I'm noticing about the text is that it makes a broader overall claim about Barragan's career. And then it goes to talk about a shift in his style. And then the third part goes on to provide an example of what the shift looked like. So that's the kind of order of content that I'm seeing here. Now let's look at A. It summarizes the career of a particular architect, states how a journey influenced that architect's career, and then emphasizes how influential that architect's career has been. Summarizes the career is what A is saying happens first. Okay, we also said that number 1 or part 1 of the text talked about just a broader claim about his career. So I would say that might match up. But let's look at the second part. States how a journey influenced that architect's career. Yeah, in part 2, it talks about a shift in Barragan's style after traveling to the US. So, okay, I can see how that might work. And then let's look at the third part that it says happens. And then emphasizes how influential that architect's career has been. Well, the third part that we identified, it doesn't mention at all the effects of his career or how famous or influential his career has been. So this third part, which doesn't match up, would make A just overall wrong. Let's look at B. It presents a general claim about a particular architect's career, describes the early stages of the architect's career, and then explains the later shift in that career. Okay, number 1 matches up. Yeah, it was a general claim about someone's career. In answer B, it says that the second thing that the text talks about is the early stages of the architect's career. But if we look at what we identified as the second part in this text, we can see that there really isn't any talk about his original work. So that would immediately just tick B off. C, it explains the design aesthetic of a particular architect, acknowledges the sources of those design choices, and then contrasts that aesthetic with the designs of earlier architects. In the first part that we identified, we can see that it doesn't really talk about the design aesthetic of Louis Barr again. It just says a general claim about how his career has changed. And so immediately one would tick that off. D, it provides a general statement about the career of a particular architect, highlights a transition in that career, and then expounds on the ways that transition is evident in the architect's work. Okay, 1 was a general claim. 2 that we identified did talk about a transition, his shift in style to incorporate principles of modernism. And then 3, it does provide an example of what that shift looked like. So we would go with D.